Hello everyone, I'm back with a new manga review, and this time we are looking at Dead Company, Volume 1 by Yoshiki Tomogai. This is a horror manga, and I use that term loosely, as it is far more dramatic thriller than it really is a horror story. However, even if it does not fit into its advertised genre, that doesn't mean it's a bad story. After all, the writing and art will determine its quality. Of note, Yoshiki Tomogai has worked on several horror manga prior to this series, so expectations are high for a new dark story. This is a spoiler-free review that will essentially cover half the manga, with the remainder being left as vague as possible so that you can enjoy the story if you choose to read it. Before we begin, I also want to point out that this was a review copy of the manga provided by Tokyopop. Also, for the record, I have not read any previous Yoshiki Tomogai manga stories, but from some research I did, I doubt the previous manga will influence how this story progresses outside of a few Easter eggs within the art. We follow Ryosuke Miyauchi, a young man in his 20s, who is the survivor of a death game that he and his high school friend Akari were forced into. It has been 3 years since he survived the death game, and Miyauchi is trying to move on with life. He gets a job interview with Entertainment Dead Company, EDC, a video game developer. As it turns out, they want him to use his experiences to help them make more realistic survival games. They call them survival horror games, but they are mostly Battle Royale or hyper-violent Among Us clones. The mislabeling of the games is a little bit annoying, but I might be just a little bit too pedantic when it comes to video game genres. Miyauchi is quickly accepted into the company, but he feels like something is off. As he learns more about the company and their odd practices, he becomes more agitated with his situation. Things get more intense as he learns some of the dark secrets of EDC and begins to plan a way to stop them from conducting their bizarre practices. The volume ends with Miyauchi making a choice to act against the company and set the stage for the next part of the story. As the story progresses, there are twists and turns, but all of them are very obvious. From my general breakdown, you can probably guess where things go. I was predicting chapters before I started reading them, and I feel that anyone vaguely familiar with the Evil Company themed thriller can predict the story as well. There is an amateurish feel to the writing due to the use of tropes that are far too familiar. A good thriller keeps you guessing. It should not be easily predictable and trope-filled. Unless, of course, you're doing that to throw off the reader's expectations for a more interesting payoff at the end. But that doesn't seem to be the direction this story is going. The art of the manga is a bit mixed. On the positive side, the characters are distinct, and only one of the characters looks similar to another character in the cast. As for that one character, it does serve the story to have that character look like she does. When it comes to scenes from the games, they have a distinct look that sets them apart from the real world. I do like the cover art, due to it being simplistic but eye-catching, and giving the vibe of a very dark story. Beyond that, it's average at best. Violence or graphic images are weak, especially compared to the imagery of the horror genre. Oftentimes, we see the results of a violent action rather than the action, making much of the visuals we see lack impact. The sight of blood may be horror to some, but there is no bite to the images that really pushes the terror of the moment. For example, there's a moment where Miyauchi discovers a room with heads on a shelf. There is no horrified expression on the faces, nor is there any extra gore hanging down from the neck. If anything, it just looks like someone took a handful of mannequin heads and put them on a shelf. As for the real world scenes, they look fine, but none of the backgrounds are anything impressive. One of the issues that kept coming up was the usage of black backgrounds for flashbacks and night sequences. The problem with this is that when you get to a night sequence, you aren't sure if it is past or present. And while it will become obvious what it is via context clues, it still takes away from the enjoyment of reading because you are taken out of the moment while trying to figure out what time it is. Despite some good art, the mid-tier quality of the backgrounds and the weak horror visuals really hold this manga back. There are some interesting characters in the story, but for the sake of avoiding spoilers, I will avoid talking about a couple of them. However, each character introduced has been generally memorable and well written. Ryosuke Miyauchi. Thankfully, we have a good lead in this story. His past trauma informs his behavior, and his inability to relate to others often ties into the fears that he has developed over the past 3 years. He thinks things through, and some of his actions, even the rash ones, don't feel out of character. He works well in this type of story. Tanahashi, the woman who brings Miyauchi into EDC, who clearly has a darker side. She is clearly a woman full of secrets and seems to enjoy revealing the truth behind the company to Miyauchi. We don't get to know her too well, but these chapters set her up as a key character who is one of the pushing factors in the story. Shinzaki, a co-worker who befriends Miyauchi early on. She is energetic and seems like a good person. She has her own reasons for joining EDC and is one of the few characters who fills in Miyauchi with some of the work culture behind EDC. She is a key character who helps Miyauchi question the company he is working for. Odagiri, another co-worker who is kind and respectful towards Miyauchi. He shows compassion towards him and understands his experiences to some extent. He is a company man who tries to bring Miyauchi deeper into the company and explain how security works with EDC. He begins as a background character and quickly expands into much more. Overall, this isn't a good book. The writing tends to be very cliché, and the twists can be seen coming a mile away. At best, this is a bad episode of Black Mirror. At worst, it is a "wouldn't that be cool" type scenario a teenager might come up with. Perhaps the second half of the story can save it, but that's unlikely. In fact, I feel like I could easily predict the next volume of this manga, which is not something you want in a thriller. Add to that, the art is mid at best, with an above average cover and some decent character designs. Bear in mind, this book is flawed, but it is not horrible. Everything is average or a little bit below average, but you can read it and not feel like you wasted your time. However, there are many better thriller and horror mangas out there. Dead Company Volume 1 is a disappointment due to the cliché story and predictable plot. It's a shame since there is some decent character work and decent character designs. The bottom line is, this is a pass. It isn't the worst manga I've read, but there are far better options out there. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back with some more horror reviews in the future. If you want me to do more manga reviews, please let me know in the comments. Until next time, I'll see you at the tavern.